In this video, I want to go through a bit into my process of taking a great photo. Now, over the past 3 or 4 years of taking photos, I've realized I like certain ones I take over others. And I think I've found by looking at my old photos, I've kind of figured out why I like certain photos over other ones and came up with a 3-part process that that I kind of use when I go out in the field and take photos. So number one is a great backdrop, which is pretty obvious. That's what most people look for, especially landscape photography. They look for a great backdrop, snap a photo, great. What I've noticed in my photos, and I look at a great photo and I look at ones that I like the most, is generally the ones I like have some sort of subject matter. So that's number two. Number one is have a great backdrop. Number two is have a subject. And the subject could be a person, it could be a vehicle or an animal or a camp setup like a tent or a canoe. Or in a recent case when we shot the igloo and made the igloo, that itself is a subject in this photo. And the combination between the landscape and the subject, things I look for can be a good composition, so good symmetry, and I like when subjects give scale to the environment. Sometimes it's hard when you look at a photo to see how big things are, so a subject helps make that happen. And I also look for cleanliness too within the frame, so not so busy. Maybe it's a forest that doesn't have all those dead branches going everywhere, but it's kind of cleaner. Even in this photo with the snow, I made sure not to go and step through all the snow in the foreground, so I could have a nice layer of snow that wouldn't distract away from the subject. And then the third thing, which kind of ties into the second thing of having a subject, is to have an experience. So whether it's a person, and it doesn't have to be just a person sitting there looking at the camera. It could be them doing something that kind of gives a inside look or a background into what's going on in the photo, what myself or my friends are doing and experiencing. And I think after looking at a lot of photos and trying to figure out what I like, I love when I see a photo and it makes me want to be there in the moment or do the things they do, because that's what motivates me to go outside and go to different places, is these people outside living, doing different things, and that's what I like to capture in my photos. And I've gotten some feedback on people saying that, oh, this photo looks great, I went there, it doesn't really look like that, it's busy, which is the nature of some places nowadays, especially maybe Banff, for example. You go there and there's tons of people, tons of tourists, because the places are beautiful. And my style of photography, I like to create an experience. So maybe I won't talk about the mosquitoes or how cold it was. I just like to create a landscape and have a subject and have it all nice and just feel good and look good. So that's my style of photography. That's the 3 things that I go for when making a great photo. And let's break down a couple of my photos that I've taken, and you'll be able to see the backdrop, the subject, and the experience in these ones. So first we'll look at this photo that was taken before it snowed, so probably in the fall, summer fall in Joffrey Lakes, which is up north of Vancouver. And this photo is cool because you could see the nice backdrop, blue water, like literally the water is that blue up there, it's glacier fed. A nice background of mountains, rocky peaks with trees, green trees, and I have Jasmine kind of centered in on her floaty. We went up there and went swimming for a day, and you can kind of see there's a good contrast between the blue water and the skin tones, and her being so close to the camera. This was shot pretty wide, I think on a 20mm Sigma lens at 1.4, which is why you get that kind of separation from subject to background with the blur. And I think it has a nice kind of casual summer vibe going on. Good color contrast with the floaty and her skin tone and the water and even the greens. I think it all works pretty well, and it's all nice and balanced. And the water is pretty clean, some ripples, but nothing that's too distracting away from the subject matter. And even in this photo here with Marco in Iceland, we were at this beach that we had to drive, I think 10 hours to get to. And it's a bit tricky getting in there because you have to pay, and then there's a gate that lifts up, and then you finally at this beach where it's black sand, which is different from what I'm used to, and it's just flat black sand all the way up to this this fjord, this mountain in the background. So having a nice backdrop. Obviously this photo, you've probably seen it before without somebody running, but I thought it was cool how this landscape is so vast and so open, to have somebody running through it, kind of in a spirit of, like, I don't know, going out and running on a beach is just kind of a fun thing to do. So having Marco there and his reflection too kind of added a lot to this photo. And also I like how the waves kind of gave direction towards the subject, which is Marco in this photo, and his footsteps being washed away by the waves too is kind of fun. So that's kind of what I look for. Good backdrop, obviously, but subject and experience of him living life in Iceland. And maybe for the last photo, I'll use this photo in Banff. It may have been snowing or just really foggy, but as you can see, there's no person in this photo. The subject matter in this case is this canoe hut right on the lake, and the lines of the rocks lead nicely up to the subject in this photo. And so this is another example of having a subject, and maybe the experience in this one could be like a cabin on a lake kind of vibe. I think everyone can agree that cabins on lakes and being there is pretty cool in general, and that you don't need to have a person per se that's front and center to have a subject in a photo. Because if this building wasn't there, it might be hard to see the scale of the trees and the lake, and I think it adds a nice touch just having something, even if it's just a building in the photo. So that's it, and I hope this made a lot of sense. If you have any comments or questions, or have any recommendations on anything that I talked about, just leave a comment below, and I'll see you next one.